So, I'm laying in bed listening to Coast to Coast AM late night radio with George Noory. Have you heard that show? They say it's the most listened to radio show in North America. I mean, wow, you know. They talk about stuff like aliens and ghosts and Satan, life after death, and you know, how people die on the operating table, and then they wake up and they tell the doctor and the nurses that while he was dead, he floated up to the ceiling and saw the doctors and the nurses looking down on the doctors and the nurse making out. Things he couldn't have known when he was dead, proving the immortality of the soul. Anyway, they talk about all kinds of weird and fascinating stuff on that show. And on this particular occasion, my man George was interviewing a book author by the name of Chris Carter, a man who had written a book called Parapsychology and the Skeptics. And naturally, as a book on skepticism, to be complete, it's going to have to mention James the Amazing Randi, right? The world's leading #1 skeptic, worshipped and feared by every scientist. Hey, listen, this guy Randi, he isn't just an embarrassment. James Randi is the world's science czar. You know, this is the guy that's in charge of science around the world. He's the science dictator. Randi is the #1 authority on what is and what isn't science. Astrophysicists like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Philip Plait, they kiss Randi's butt. He's their #1 guy on what is and what isn't medicine. And he's their insurance that as long as they do what he tells them to do and think like he wants them to think and say the right words like good little boys, everything will be all right. But if you get out of line and start shooting your mouth off on things like witches and the supernatural and Jesus and that stuff, you know, all that stuff being real, if you say one word about that stuff being real, it's over. You got that? There'll be no talk about any of that stuff being real. And that includes blabbering about astrology and numerology, magic, and cold fusion. But especially, don't any of you get the idea that there's anything at all to homeopathy. Not one drop, not one molecule of anything but plain water is in it. Not even in a swimming pool the size of the Milky Way. You got that? This is the man who has $1 million to give to anyone who can prove to him the paranormal or psychic abilities or the supernatural or UFOs, or in my case, homeopathy, is real. Especially homeopathy. Because, Randi says, and the bobbleheads like Stephen Novella and Stephen Barrett and Ben Goldacre, they all agree. It's a scam. People might mistake it for real medicine. See? And so anyway, I'm starting to nod off, and I'm starting, just starting to get a good night's sleep. I mean, that's the one thing about that show, is that sometimes it's so interesting you can't sleep. But anyway, I'm starting to skepticism. And all of a sudden, the book author says, Randi has backed down from homeopath John Benneth. I sit up in bed. John Benneth? Did he say John Benneth? Hey man, that's me. I'm John Benneth. West of the Rockies, call 1-800-BENNETH. East of the Rockies, call 1-OMG-JOHN. Wildcard line, call 1-800-Randi back down from homeopath John Benneth. Well, it's true. I just didn't think I'd be hearing it on my favorite late night radio two-way telephone talk show. And this is just after I'd gotten a comment on my last video about why it is I keep talking about Randi. This guy Randi is a major homeopathy antagonist #1. Okay, you know, here's the comment I got on my last video. It comes from somebody who calls himself Old Syphilitic. Dear John, I agree with what you say about Randi. That said, don't you think it's time to move on? We know that Randi and his ilk are not interested in the truth. They don't know anything. They know nothing. They just don't know anything at all. They're just a bunch of dummies, and you are the man. Yeah. Well, I added a little to that. But that's what he meant to say. Anyway. Oh, so here's my answer to that. Old Syphilitic, listen to me. 12 years ago, this guy Randi said he was going to pay me, John Benneth, $1 million if I could come up with a test for homeopathy that would separate the verum from the placebo, the wheat from the chaff. $1 million for a way to identify the homeopathic remedy from the water from which it was made. Simple. Randi agreed to the test, he put it in writing. And I sent in my notarized application. And what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened at all. Randi ran away. Said he had bigger fish to fry. And that's a fact, Jack. So when I heard on the world's greatest radio program, Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, that James the Amazing Randi had backed down from John Benneth, I'm thinking, hey, you know what? You know what? It's not over. It's just beginning. Just as I predicted in a previous video. And what I ought to do is show the world just what it is that Randi backed down from. Now, check this out. This is one of the world's most interesting science experiments. See? Like Jack Benny would say, see? This is dielectric strength testing of homeopathic dilutes of HgCl2, which is mercuric chloride. It was done by Albert Brucato and James Stevenson. This is the Brucato dielectric strength test for a homeopathic remedy. Now get this. This is really interesting. You see, if you take pure water is not a very good conductor of electricity. And that's what this is all about, is using pure water as a conductor of electricity. And this was done with a Hewlett-Packard dielectric stress tester. Okay, now this dotted line that you see here, this is the amount of volts in kilovolts. This is in kilovolts, 5 kilovolts that is run through water to establish a connection. So this is the amount of electricity that it takes to create a connection between the positive and the negative pole, running it through water. So this represents the amount of dilution here. Okay, so here's 1x, which means it's 1 part in 10, 1 part mercuric chloride in 9 parts of water. All right, for the first test. And 1 in 10, it only takes 2.45 kilovolts in order to make that connection. That's called the puncture voltage. Now, a lot of people, they kind of glaze over when I talk about this, but you think about it long enough, you'll understand what I'm trying to say here. Pure water is not a very good conductor. But when you put a solute in it, like salt, or in this case merchloride, a little bit of mercury, it becomes a very good conductor, and the puncture voltage will drop. The puncture voltage being the amount of voltage that it takes in order to make the connection. And here, this would be, and when you dilute out a homeopathic remedy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up here to the 23rd, 24th dilution, that's pure water. All right. There's not one molecule left. This is the swimming pool the size of the Milky Way that they're talking about. So, and it takes about 6 kilovolts it should take about 6 kilovolts in order to make that connection. Now, I hope you're following me on this. And what I'll do is I'll put this up on my blog. And so you can go and read more closely. You can read the test for yourself. It's more work for me, but I think it's worth it. So here's the first test they run. They run 8 series of tests of dilutions, 1 to 10 dilutions, what a decimal dilution, which is that's what the X means. So 1x means it's 1 part in 10. So it goes up by it should go up by powers of that. So a 2x, this would be 1 part in 10. A 2x would be 1 part mercury chloride in 100 parts water. This would be 1,000 parts, 1 part in 1,000 parts water. 1 part in what would that be? 10,000, 100,000, a million. Well, no, that's probably, it's not. It's more than that. But by the time you get up to the 23rd and the 24th dilution, it should theoretically be pure water, and the puncture voltage should be up to 6 kilovolts, as opposed to down here where it's only at 2. So here's the second. This line here is the peak voltage. This was the peak voltage for a test out of these 8 tests, and this would be out of the 8 tests the lowest. So the first one is 2.45 kilovolts was the peak voltage. 2.40 was the lowest voltage. So it varies a little bit. Okay, it's a little bit of slap on this. So here's 2.65 kilovolts a second, and here's 3.05 kilovolts for the third. So this is 1. What did I say? 1 part in 1,000. And here peak voltage, and this is the conservative part. All right, maybe there's a little contamination in this or something. So we take the peak voltage at 3.50, 3.5, 3.90, 4.20 kilovolts. All right, and this dotted line, you can see what's coming here. This dotted line is what it should do. This is what would be the projected curve for this, for these dilutions. And each dilution, 1 drop from the previous dilution is put into the second dilution. That's how these things are increasing exponentially. So, and then they're agitated. They're struck against a book or something like that, against the guy's head if he's really got a hard head. And but look at here, on the seventh dilution, something very odd happens. And this is a true scientific anomaly, because it should be here, right? It should be at 4.5 kilovolts, but it's not. It's at 3.95 kilovolts. It suddenly has dropped. And on the 8th, this is the 7th dilution. On the 8th dilution, it stays at 3.95. It should be up here. What the heck is going on here? Well, this is homeopathy. See, this is a homeopathic high dilute. Here at 4.20 kilovolts is the ninth dilution. This is the peak voltage. All right, then it goes down, and so you can see it's down here. Then all of a sudden, look at this. On the 13th dilution, 0.65 kilovolts. It's the same as it was at the 5th dilution. Now, then it jumps up again here. And it starts going down again. Up, down. It's starting to kind of act like a waveform. Now, something really weird is coming up here. Because here, at the 23rd dilution, or the 23rd and the 24th dilution, to a point as low as it was back here on the 4th dilution, on the low. The peak is a little higher. And then it goes up to 3.95 and down to 3.40, up to 3.65, down to 3.40, up to 3.90, down to 3.25. So this is now the 30th dilution, 31st, 32nd, 33rd, 32nd, 33rd. Well, what's real interesting is it starts at this point, at the point of, this is Avogadro's limit. This is where there should be no material content, no mercuric chloride left in this solution. Okay, we would assume this is pure water. But look, it's acting like there's something in it. And it's jumping up and down in a very predictable way through these dilutions. Until it hits the 30th dilution, and then it seems to level out a little bit more. Okay, that's the dielectric strength test for homeopathic dilutions that was done by Brucato. And this is a replicated test. This test replicated an earlier test that was done by two Frenchmen, Alphonse Gay and Jean Bnneth. You've seen the Bnneth homeopathic remedies. Well, those were named after him. And they used instead of a dielectric stress tester, they used a galvanometer. So this is what Randi is running away from. Because this shows a definite difference in the structural qualities of the homeopathic solution from its plain water, from its vehicle, from the water from which it was made. This is pure water. This is what pure water should be here. This is where it should be. This is where this should be. You see? This is where this should be. Okay? And so that's it. That's what Randi's running away from. This is the test that is costing him, that would cost him if he ever did this and did it correctly. This is the test that would cost him $1 million. This is a $1 million test here. This is what Randi agreed to 12 years ago, and has since then refused to put into operation. Now, of course, you know, what he did on the BBC Horizon homeopathy test was he just set up a straw man. You see, and that's what if he was really pushed on this, I would predict that's what he would try to do, is just have his own people do it and screw it up. You see, straw man test. So there you have it. The homeopathic $1 million test. What's interesting about this is that this has some real consequences to it in its uses, because here this is acting like at this point, and you can see this slightly dropping. It's acting like there's actual material in it. So if this is what it does with the puncture voltage, what would this do for energy studies? But this fits into further research that we've done on homeopathy, and it really does prove something. It not only proves that homeopathic entities are real, these high dilutes actually have real physical characteristics to them. It also shows that they have energetic qualities to them. What's happening here is that the hydrogen bonds in the water are forming channels. That's what's happening.